This is a production of World Video Bible School. To God be the glory.
Hello, and welcome back to our course on using the Greek New Testament. We're glad that you joined us again, and we hope that you have found the first two videos profitable. If you haven't watched those yet, go back and watch those videos. It's going to be very important that you have that introductory material before you begin the third session. We're really in part 2 now, called The Basics, and we'll have several lessons under that title. And our first lesson today is, in fact, on the letters and sounds of the Greek. I made some assignments before as we ended the second session, that had to do with reading some sections out of the preface area and also chapter 1. If you haven't read chapter 1, go back and read that now. Stop the video and do that. And then come back and we can continue on. We're now ready to talk about learning to pronounce those Greek letters. And you need to get a copy of the text if you don't have one. I'm going to get mine now at this time. And I'm going to turn over to pages 2 and 3. So get that text, turn over to pages 2 and 3. And we're going to be looking at that chart, and we'll be flashing up some graphics up on the screen, the letters of Greek up on the screen. We'll go back and forth and talk about those. We'll also, a little later on in this session, learn how to write those Greek letters. So we've got a lot of work to do today. Be sure you have some paper. Be sure you have something to write with. Be sure you have your text in front of you as we go down through these letters. Now, before we begin to learn these letters, there are a few things I want you to know up front. A few things that are going to be very important. First of all, don't think you can bypass this session. You need to learn these Greek letters. If you're going to have any enjoyment at all out of using the Greek New Testament, you need to learn these letters. You need to commit them to memory. You need to learn how to write them. And learning how to write them is just going to reinforce your knowing these letters and being able then to pronounce the words and to have those words then in your mind. Another thing that I want you to be aware of before we begin to learn these letters is that there are going to be some similarities between the Greek letters and the English letters. I think you'll see that right off. And of course, that's to your advantage. It's going to help you to remember these letters a lot better. A lot of our English words come right out of the Greek, and I think you'll see that as we go along. Something else that I want you to be aware of is that we're going to be primarily concerned about the lowercase letters, Since the Greek New Testament of the modern era only uses uppercase letters to begin pronouns, or proper nouns that is, and to begin paragraphs and also direct speech, you don't see a whole lot of the uppercase or what we call sometimes the capital letters. And so we're going to be focusing upon those lowercase letters and just learning that. One of the things that I'm going to try to do in this course is to eliminate as much of the extraneous material as possible. I know that a lot of grammars will focus on accent marks and they'll focus on learning all of those uppercase letters and so forth. And to me, that's just one more thing to maybe get in the way of really getting down to using the Greek New Testament. Not that they're unimportant, because they are important, but just not as important, I think, as you begin to learn the Greek. And we want to try to get as much of those things out of the way as possible to get right down to the things that you can start using immediately. But again, because some of those capital letters aren't used all that often in our modern Greek New Testaments, we're just going to focus on the lowercase letters as we learn them today. So let's go through the text now, and what I want you to do is I'm going to pronounce the Greek letter. We're going to pull it up on the screen in just a moment. I will pronounce the Greek letter, and then I want you to say it right after me. It's real important that you do that. Don't feel inhibited about saying it out loud, even if there's a large group of you or whatever. I want you all to say it, because it's important that you hear Greek, that you say it, as well as being able to see it and read it. That's very important. So I'm going to pronounce the letter, and then I want you to say it after me. I'll pronounce it again, then you repeat it again after me, and then I'm going to give you the sound that goes along with that letter, and then I want you to make the sound as well. So let's begin now to look at these Greek letters, and let's start with the very first letter, alpha. There it is on the screen. Notice that it is pronounced alpha. All right, I'm going to say it again. Alpha. I know that some people pronounce that a little differently, but we're going to pronounce it as alpha. And as we pronounce that, now go back to the screen if we can, or back to the video. The alpha sound has the sound of ah. Ah. Alpha. All right, our next letter in the alphabet is the letter beta. Beta. Be sure you say it now. Beta. Beta makes the sound of B, 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 as in ball. Beta. All right, the next letter is the letter gamma. Gamma. Gamma is a guttural sound. It comes from kind of down deep in your throat. And gamma has the G sound as in G, 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 just like the word gift. Gift. So gamma. Our next letter is the letter delta. Delta. Delta makes the sound of D as in dog. D, D. Now make that sound, D. Delta. The next letter is epsilon. Epsilon. Epsilon makes the sound of eh, 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 as in bet. Eh. Epsilon. The next letter is zeta. Zeta. Zeta makes the sound of a DZ as in z, z, like ads. Z, z. Kind of give that D sound. Sometimes that's difficult to do, but try to put that DZ sound in there. Later on we'll run into a word that's baptizo, baptizo. And of course our word baptism comes from that word. It's a transliterated word, but baptizo. And you'll hear the DZ sound in that letter. Okay, let's go back to the next letter now. Our next letter is eta. Eta. Eta makes the sound of A, as in the word obey. A, eta. All right, our next letter is the letter theta. Now, I want you to notice there are two letters there, but they're actually the very same letter, but just two different ways of writing those. And when we learn how to write our Greek letters a little later on, we'll show you that it's going to be easier to write them by using the symbol that was on the left up there on the screen, and the one on the right is the printed one. And so when we write our Greek letters, we'll talk more about that. But you need to be able to recognize both of those because, again, some texts will use one and some will use the other font. And so be sure you learn both of those. But that is the Greek letter theta. Theta. And theta makes the TH sound th, as in thin. Theta. Th. And be sure you say these now. All right, let's go to the next letter. The next letter is iota. Iota. And iota makes the sound of I, or sometimes I. But primarily it makes the sound of I, as in pit. Now you also will see, as the text tells you, that it gives you sort of the E sound as in machine, I, or I, depending on whether it's long or short. But that's iota. And we'll notice that iota also will become what is known as a subscript A little later on, we'll talk about that it's a subscript. In other words, it comes down underneath other letters in a Greek word, and when it does that, you don't pronounce it. You don't worry about pronouncing it then when it's subscripted under a particular letter. All right, let's go to the next letter. The next letter is kappa. Kappa. Kappa makes the K sound, as in k, k, as in the word kin, k. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. The next letter is lambda. Lambda. Lambda makes the sound of L, as in l, or as in the word lamb. It makes the sound of l, lambda. And I haven't been pointing it out to you, but in your text on pages 2 and 3, you'll notice that they give some of the corresponding English sounds. And I'm sure you've noticed that already, but we're not going to necessarily point that out as we go through the video, but you might want to pay attention to that. Okay, let's look at the next letter. The next letter is mu. Mu. Sort of a funny sounding letter, isn't it? Mu. And it makes the sound of just like Mom's good old home cooking. It's good, isn't it? From the word man, makes the sound as in man. Mu. That's our letter, mu. All right, let's look at the next one. The next letter is nu. 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 And it makes the sound of as in name. Now, one of the things about that letter, as you look at it there on the screen, and we'll point this out a little bit later, is that this is one of those letters that is going to vary just a little bit in how it looks. The stroke on the left-hand side sometimes comes straight down in some of the text, but and here it looks a little bit more like the English V, but not exactly. But you'll see that variation as we go along. But that's the word nu, as in making the sound Okay, let's go to the next letter. Our next letter is the Greek letter xi. Xi. This is one of those you have to make sort of out of your throat and come out of your throat and say that sound, make that sound. Xi. And you can hear it in the word wax. Wax. Notice how you make that sound. Wax. Wax. Okay. Xi. Xi. All right. Our next letter is the letter omicron. 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 Now, omicron makes the sound of ah. Ah, as in omelet. Omelet. Now, this is one of those letters, too, that sometimes there is a difference of opinion about maybe how best to pronounce it. And I'm going to give you just a short break here from these letters and talk to you about something. We're using the sounds that came from an individual by the name of Erasmus. It's sometimes called the Erasmian pronunciation, and from the early Reformation period. And Erasmus went back and gave us some sounds of what he thought these sounds should be like, and many of them are closely related to modern Greek pronunciations and sounds and so forth. But anyway, that's the pronunciation that we're using. It's the one that is used in a lot of seminaries. Now, because there are some differences, you'll find that people disagree about maybe how best to pronounce some of these letters. So you may find from time to time people pronouncing words a little bit differently, depending on what part of the world or what part of the country they're from, or what maybe seminary they went to, or what school of learning, higher learning that they attended. And some will actually pronounce this letter omicron. Now let's go back to our video here and look at the screen, and some will pronounce that with the O sound, as in obey, as in obey. Now we have a long O sound that we'll talk about later on with the omega, but we're primarily going to pronounce this with the ah sound as in omelet. Okay, so that's omicron as in ah. All right, our next letter is the letter P. The letter P. Now, I know that mathematicians say that that's pi, but as my Greek professor said years ago, mathematicians don't always make very good Greek students. Well, that may or may not be true, but this is the letter pi, and that's how we're going to pronounce it, pi, and it makes the p sound as in pin. P. All right, that's the letter P. All right, now let's go to the next letter, and this is the letter rho. Rho. Now, don't get this confused with your English P. Sometimes that confuses people, and there's not really any easy way to overcome that obstacle. Just remember that in Greek, that letter right there that we're looking at this on the screen is the letter rho, and it makes the R sound. R, as in rat. Now say it, rho. All right, it makes the sound of r, as in rat. All right, let's look at the next letter. The next letter is the letter sigma. Sigma. Now, if you'll notice on the screen that there are two letters. They're actually the same letter, but one of those, both of those are sigmas, but one of them, the one at the right, is known as the terminal sigma, because that's the sigma form that you use at the end of a word. In other words, whenever there's a sigma that comes at the end of a word, that's the one you're going to use, the one on the right. The one on the left is the one that you use that begins a word or that is in the middle of the word somewhere, just anywhere else other than the end. But both of them make the sound of s, as in sing. All right, so that's sigma. It makes the sound of s. Now say that, s, sigma. All right, let's look at the next letter. The next letter is tau. Tau. And as you can see, it looks a whole lot like our English T, and in fact, that's the sound that it makes. T, as in tail. T. The Greek letter tau. Say it again, tau. T. All right, let's look at the next letter. The next letter is the letter upsilon. Upsilon. And upsilon makes the sound as in the word lute, as in oo. Sometimes it makes the sound as in put. Upsilon. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. The next letter is phi. Phi. Phi makes the PH sound as in physics. F. Now again, we have two characters up on the screen, and you'll notice that they're very similar. The one on the left is the one that I'm going to teach you to write because it's just a little easier to draw and one that I'm most familiar with, and as I from time to time in class here use that letter and write it on the board, I don't want you to be confused and wonder, well, where in the world did that come from? What's that letter? That's how I was taught to write it, and it's just a little easier for me. It's a little quicker to write it that way. And you'll also see it in some textbooks and in some texts. But a lot of the Greek New Testaments that you'll pick up and read will have this other letter to the side there, that other character, but just memorize both of them. Know that both of them have the sound of f, as in physics. Okay, it has the PH sound. All right, that's the letter phi. Okay, the next letter that we're going to learn is the letter chi. Chi. Key makes the sound, the CH sound, as in chemist. Chemist. Kind of almost more of a guttural sound out of the throat. In fact, some grammars will tell you to pronounce it in just that way. K. All right. Key. Key. Notice how the sound comes out of your throat. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. The next letter is psi. Psi. Get that PS sound in there. Psi. And it makes the sound corresponding to our English letters, PS, as in the word taps. Taps. So, ps, ps. Just like you're trying to capture someone's attention. Ps, ps. There was a commercial years ago running on American television that said, psst, if you want to capture someone's attention, you need to whisper. Well, that's the sound, psst, psst. If you'll look back now on the screen, we have our letter psi, psi. Okay, the last letter, and incidentally, remember Jesus said that He is, as we say it in English, the Alpha and the Omega, and in Greek we sometimes say Alpha, and but the last letter here now is Omega. Omega. And that Omega makes the sound, the long O sound, as in gold, O, 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 O. All right, now let's go back and look at all of the letters in order and go through them quickly now. And we'll name them again and give you a chance to sort of look at them one more time. And then at the end of that, we're going to want you to stop the video, and we're going to have you work on those letters and commit them to memory, and then we'll come back and do some exercises. But let's run through the letters one more time. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, p, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. All right, very good, very good. I hope that you were pronouncing those letters and beginning to commit those sounds to memory as we went through that exercise there. And so what I want you to do at this point, again, it's very important that you do this, is take a moment, stop the tape, stop the video, and put those letters down on cards, on some sort of cue card, a flash card. Write it down on one side and maybe the name of it on the back side with the sound that it makes, and mix those up occasionally. In other words, try to learn them in order, and I want you to do that. Learn those letters in order, because it's going to be helpful when you begin to look up words in our lexicons, and to be able to look them up alphabetically, and so that you don't always have to rely upon the Strong's numbers to get to where you need to be. But we want you to learn them in order. We want you to be able to recognize the letters on sight, even if we mixed them all up, and to know their corresponding sounds. And so go ahead at this point and stop the video and memorize those letters and their sounds. Okay, now that you've learned those Greek letters in order, be sure you practice them as often as you can so that you'll remember that alphabetical order. And we're going to move on now to something else that's in the text, and that's on page 3 of your text. And it has to do with Greek phonology and morphology. So we're going to talk about Greek phonology and morphology. Now these are just a couple of terms that I want you to be familiar with. It's not necessarily that you commit them to memory, but I do want to talk about them because they'll come up, particularly the word morpheme will come up a little later on as we talk about some things. And at this point I also want to mention to you that, again, we're not going to talk about every aspect of the grammar book. I'm just going to highlight those things that I think are more important than others for our study, and not that the other things are not important. You'll want to go back and read and reread this material again to let it soak in, and so that you can have a good foundation of information. But my job is to simply highlight some of the things that are in the book that I think are going to be helpful in facilitating our discussion a little later on. And as you'll notice that Professor Black here mentions that these two terms, phonology and morphology. Let's talk first of all about phonology, or these phonemes. Phonemes. There's the word on the screen, phonemes. In fact, that word phonemes has a Greek word in it, phone, which is the word for sound or voice. Now, a phoneme just simply is a sound represented by a letter. The B sound, the B sound, is simply a phoneme. That's all in the world it is. It's a sound. And I want you to notice something now. We're going to go to the board. I'm going to take off my jacket. We're going to get comfortable, and because we're going to be going to the board more and more. And so let's roll up our sleeves and let's go to work, okay? All right, let's notice over here on the board that this B sound is a phoneme. It's a phoneme. And just a little differentiation between the B sound and the D sound can make all the difference in the world in understanding this word and understanding that these are two different words. Notice they look very similar, but one is facing one way and one the other. So we have to be attentive to those phonemes. We have to be careful about noticing those letters and the differentiation in those sounds. Notice the difference between the D sound and the B sound, and that you simply have then two different words, even though these letters are the same in both words. Now, Greek will do the very same thing. The word may look very much the same as another word that you will pronounce, but one letter can make all the difference in the world. And we know that. That happens in nearly every language, that those sounds become very, very important. So pay attention to those phonemes. Pay attention to the slight variation in sounds of letters. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about are morphemes. Morphemes. And you'll notice that word there up on the screen, morpheme. Look at it closely. It has the word morph in it, from which it actually comes from a Greek word, morphe, which has reference to form. Now, a morpheme is simply the smallest unit of meaning in any given language. It's the smallest unit of meaning in any given language. It's not necessarily a word even. It can just be a letter or a couple of letters together that make one sound that carries with it meaning, okay? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Take a look at these sentences that I've written here up on the board. This first sentence, the apostle talks to the slave. All right? That word, or the verb talk here with the ending S, tells us that that's going on at present time. But notice now the very same sentence, but with a small change in this sentence here. The apostle talked to the slave. All right, so in this sentence, this ed here, which we know stands for, in the English language, past tense, is a morpheme. Sometimes we'll just call it a morph, a time morph, to refer to sort of quickly help us get along in our discussion about it. But that ed sound there, or those letters ed, is a morpheme, And that tells us that this talking took place in the past. Now, see, you're accustomed to that. You see it all the time in your own language. In the English language, you're going to see that quite readily. So don't be surprised then when we come over to the Greek New Testament and see morphemes as well. In fact, it's very important that we pay attention to those. Let me give you some examples. I'm going to erase what we had here on the board previously, and I'm going to give you a couple of Greek examples of some morphemes now that you recognize some of the letters that we've talked about and you've been committing them to memory. I want you to remember this letter. Remember that letter? That's the letter sigma. Sigma. Now, that letter just by itself, of course, is a phoneme. It makes a sound. But in Greek, it's also a morpheme because it carries with it meaning. It carries with it meaning. Let me illustrate for you. If you were to pronounce that Greek word, that would be the Greek word luo, luo. And luo means I loose, I loose. And we'll talk about why we know that a little later on. But for now, let's illustrate what we're talking about with our morpheme sigma. If we wrote this same word here but inserted a sigma here, this would no longer be I loose, but it would now mean I shall loose. I shall loose. That sigma there, that sound, is telling us that this is future, telling us that the loosing is going on in the future. So what you have here then is a classic example of a morpheme. Now Greek has numerous morphemes, and we'll see some of them. They'll look like this, as in the word men, men. Another morpheme will be that sound, saw, saw. Okay? So those are some examples. Let me give you another example of another morpheme. I want you to notice that another example that we have of a morpheme is the letter alpha. Now alpha carries with it the meaning of un. Just like in English, when we prefix the two letters un before something, we're basically negating it. It's a negation. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about in Greek, first of all. If you took the word pistos, all right, which means faithful, all right, Greek word pistos, which means faithful, and you prefixed the alpha before that word, apistos, that would mean unfaithful, unfaithful. Just as it is in English, that word un negates, here you have faithful, here someone is not faithful. And so you have a morpheme, a unit of meaning. So pay attention to those as we go through the course, and just wanted you to be familiar with that terminology, particularly the term morpheme or morph, because I'll be referring to that on several occasions. All right, now we really want to go to work and start learning our Greek letters and how to write them. And so take this moment to get a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and we'll start on that now. Okay, if you've got that paper and something to write with, take a moment to write out some lines on that paper. If you don't have any paper that has lines on it, we'll try to provide some for you. Maybe you have that in front of you now. But whatever you have, get something that maybe has some lines on it that so you can follow along. And in fact, take a look up here at the board what we've done. We've got basically 3 lines here that we've drawn. And some of the letters that we'll make will be in this space. Some of them will cover the entire space. Some of them will start here and come down in here. And so we're going to make them extra large on here so that you'll be able to see them. And something else we're going to do in this video is use a method or a way of drawing these letters that I've primarily become accustomed to. They're a little different than maybe the way that some people might make them, not so drastically different that you won't be able to tell, how to recognize them or read them when you read other letters, but they are just a little even different than what you find in the text by Black. He shows you in that textbook how to begin some of those letters. But I found several years ago a textbook that had a way of drawing these out with arrows that I think are very helpful, and that's what we're going to do. So essentially this is what's going to happen. We're going to look at it on the screen first, on the video, and then we're going to come to the board. As I talk you through it first on the video, then we're going to come to the board, and I'm going to draw a few of them, and then we'll go back and look at it one more time on the screen on that letter. And if you need to, pause the video, and so it gives you a chance to practice those if you feel comfortable with that. And in fact, I would recommend that maybe you do that. If you don't feel like you can quite keep up with the pace that we're going to go at, just stop that video and then, or pause it and then come back and we'll do these letters in their alphabetical order. So get your pencil, get your pen, your paper, and now let's start on learning how to write these Greek letters. And as we write through them, we're going to be making the sounds, so you need to repeat those sounds after me. It's important to learn how to write, learn how to hear the sound, and to get that sound in your mind. So let's start now with our Greek letters, and we'll begin with this very first letter, the Greek letter alpha. Now that's the Greek letter alpha. Notice on the screen that the arrow begins at the top of that line. You can start your mark. It's one stroke. This is all one stroke. You shouldn't have to lift your pen off the paper when you make this letter. You put the pen down and you come down, you can see, and then you sort of go back around in a circle and then cross back over and down under. That's the letter alpha. Now let me show you how to make it on the screen or on the chalkboard. And as I do this now, you'll have to bear with me. My penmanship isn't the greatest in the world, and sometimes it's a little difficult writing on a whiteboard. And I'm going to do the best I can to conform to those rules or to those guidelines there. But bear with me and use the one that you see on the screen as indeed the primary example of how to make those letters. So here we go. Let's take this first letter, alpha, and as you remember, it started just about right here. You come down, touch the bottom, come around, and come back over the top like that. You see how I did that? All right, we're going to start here. We're going to come back around and come back over like that. Something like that, okay? That's the letter alpha. Now I want you to say it, alpha, and I want you to give me the sound now, ah, ah, ah. Let me make it one more time for you. Start right here. Come back around like that, alpha, alpha. All right, now practice that several times and say that sound, ah, ah. All right, look at it at the screen one more time. There it is. If you needed a little bit more instruction about how to follow that through and make that letter. Okay, let's go to the next letter. The next letter is, do you remember? It's beta. Beta. All right, look at it closely now. Notice that this letter starts actually below the line, and it's going to incorporate two sections of our line, of our graph there, of our area. And then it'll come down, looks just similar to the English letter B. Now I had a professor one time that said don't call them B's because it's not a B, it's a beta. So hopefully that won't confuse you too much, but it does look a little bit like the letter B. And so let's make that now. Let's go to the board and make that letter. Notice that we're going to start below the line and we're going to come up and we're going to go all the way up here. We're going to come around something like that and then back around like that, okay? So that's the letter beta. Beta. We start below the line, come back down around, and then back around like that. Beta. B, b, b. Now look back on the screen again. Let's go back and look at the video and notice that that intersection comes right, when you come back around making your turn, that you need to end up about halfway there on that straight line. That's the letter beta. Beta. B, b, b. Beta. Okay, practice writing that a few times. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. The next letter, you remember, is gamma. Gamma. Now say it, gamma. Notice it's going to take up basically only one section of our area, and that intersection of that gamma, it needs to sit right down there on the bottom of that line. Take a look at it closely. All right. Now let's come back here and let's draw it on the board. Here's how I like to make it, just something like this. Start here, come back around, and just make a small loop back down here, a tight loop usually, and come back right there. Notice where I've intersected, it's sitting on the line. Sitting on the line. That's pretty much where we want to be. Okay? So I'm going to start again, and then come back around, and just like that. Now, some people go the other way, and that's hard for me to do. They maybe start here and come around, but I like to start here and then back up around like that. So gamma, gamma, gamma. It makes the g, g, g sound. Gamma, gamma. Okay? Now, take a look at it one more time. There it is, gamma, gamma. All right, let's look at the next letter. I'm going to see if you recognize it. All right, it's the letter delta. It's the letter delta. It makes the D sound, delta, d, 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 delta. Okay, I'm actually going to show you now two ways of making that letter. You may be accustomed, as you can see it represented there before on the screen, that it started off like this, kind of made a circle, and then comes back around like that. Okay, and that's the way that it's shown on our screen here on the video, and that's a good way of making it. Delta, delta. I kind of had grown accustomed to making it like this, starting up here, which probably is the best thing in the world. But anyway, that's the way I sort of make mine. If you see me do that in the course of our writing letters upon the board, you know, you might have to say, teacher, heal thyself, physician, heal thyself. Well, this is a good way of doing it. As you can see, it's a lot neater, and but it looks sort of like a little bomb, doesn't it? A circle with a little stem coming off the top of it, or maybe a bomb fuse or something. But that's the letter delta. That's the letter delta. Okay, practice a few of those and make that duh sound. As you write the letters, it's important, as you're writing them, to say it out loud. Say duh, duh, duh as you're writing it. Delta, duh, duh, duh. Okay, let's take a look at the next letter. All right, here's our next letter. It's the letter epsilon. Epsilon. That's pretty easy to draw, I think, if you'll take a look at where we begin. Now let's go over here. Epsilon. Look right here. We're going to start here. We're going to come around like that and back around like that. Did you see how I did that? Epsilon. Epsilon. It needs to sit down on that line. Epsilon. Epsilon. Let's do one more. Epsilon. Now look back on this. Let's put one back up on the screen again, the one that we looked at just a moment ago. Epsilon. Epsilon. All right. There's a good example of it. Now practice that several times so that you'll become very proficient at it. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. Next letter. Zeta. Zeta. Let's say it. Zeta. Zeta. All right, now notice, zeta actually is going to begin somewhere right around here, just kind of above the line a little bit. And I like to go like that, come down, then make my mark around, sort of like a big C, and then come around like that. Zeta, zeta. So start here, come around almost like a big C, and then back around like that. Zeta, zeta. So just a little mark, back around. Again, there may be some variations of that if you'll notice in various texts. Zeta, zeta, z, z. Almost, it has the DZ sound. Remember, as in baptizo, baptizo. The DZ sound, the DZ. All right, take a look at it one more time. Zeta, zeta. All right, here's our next letter. It's the letter eta. Say it now, eta. Notice how it's made. It's going to be within just the lower section of our graph that we've been working on, and it starts on the left-hand side and just sort of like making two little mountain, one little mountain and then a great big mountain, if you want to look at it that way. So get a good look at it there, and now let's go to the board and see how it's made here. Notice how we do this. We're going to start about right here, maybe not quite that much, but just a little tail. You come down, you can go back up, and just like that. Sometimes people will leave it a little long, sort of like that, but just like that. Notice how we do it. Eta, A. Say it now. Eta, A. Okay? All right. Look at it back on the screen one more time. There it is. Eta. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. Try to say it now. Theta. All right, now notice we're going to start on the left-hand side. Notice how those arrows then swing down to the bottom, and they come up all the way, encompasses two sections of our graph up here, of our lines, and then sort of meets back in the middle. Now, remember, as I told you about earlier when we were learning those letters, that there actually are going to be two different ways of making that, or two different forms of it that you'll see. I'm going to try to give you both of them here in just a moment, but I really don't want you to learn how to write one of them. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start just about right here, and we'll come up. It's all one stroke. We come back around and bring it in around like that. Theta. So we start here, or start about right here, come around, and back in like that. Now sometimes you'll see it printed in various text looking something like that right there. All right? Both of those, there's no difference in meaning, and you don't put one at the end and the other one in the middle of the word like we do the sigma. Both of them are thetas, and they're pronounced with the TH sound, so write that out. Theta, th. Now look at it at the screen one more time. All right? There it is, theta. All right, let's have our next letter. All right, an easy one. This is iota. Just a small little mark. All right, let's go to the board now and let's make it. Iota. You just simply come straight down, have a little, maybe just a little crook on it at the end. Iota. Sometimes that iota is going to be subscripted. In other words, it's going to be under. Sub means under. Script has reference to writing. We're going to write it just under, look, just like that, a little bitty, little small iota underneath the letter in the sentence or in the word. But that's the word or the letter iota, and it has the I sound. I. All right, let's take a look at our next letter. Take a look at it. All right, it's the letter kappa. 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 Now, notice that it's made with two strokes. So you're going to have to pick your pen up off the paper to make this one. And S1 equals stroke 1, and S2 on there equals stroke 2. So we'll go stroke down just straight, and then you see how it's made then going over the right-hand side, coming back down to the middle of that first stroke, and then back down again, just like very similar to the letter K. That's how we're going to make it. Let's go to the board and notice how this kappa is made, just like this. Okay, just like that. Okay, kappa, K. All right, go back to and look at it. There it is again. Good. Kappa. Now, I want you to, at this point, if you have your text there nearby you, to go and look at it in the textbook. And you're going to notice that in that textbook that it is made just a little bit differently in some ways, and there they have it looking pretty much like the way that we've made it. In other text, it'll almost look a little bit like an X, but you'll see it after a while, and you'll learn what it looks like, and know that that kappa is just like the kappa that we have here on the board. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. Lambda. All right, notice that again that it's two strokes. See how those arrows go and how it's made? Lambda. All right, let's go to the board here. Lambda starts way up here, And it's going to come down just like that, and then something like that. Okay? Lambda. Lambda. I know those weren't exactly the best lambdas in the world, but if you'll take a look at it, we'll go back now to the screen, and you can see there lambda. Notice where you start that second stroke is right there on the middle line. Lambda. Lambda. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. The next letter is, remember, it's mu. 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 Take a look how you're going to start below the line. You're going to go straight up, come back down, and then you're going to let it sit. The bottom of that letter is going to sit on that line. It's going to come back up again, and then back down, and it's going to have just a little bit of a tail at the end of that letter. But that's the letter mu, and it makes the sound of So let's make it here. So you're going to start here. We're going to come up, come back around like that, and then we're going to give it a little bit of a tail. Okay, so one more time. Here we go. We're going to start here, come back down our line again. It's all one stroke, a little tail. Mu, mu, mu. Okay, let's look at it there. Again, the letter mu. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. It's the letter nu, nu, nu. And it has the N sound. And notice on the screen there, it looks a little bit like a V. And I told you about this earlier, that we couldn't quite get it to come straight down on the computer graphic, but here's how I want you to make it. Let's go to the board. I want you to kind of come straight down here. We're going to start here in the middle line. We're going to come straight down, and then we're going to just sort of come up like that a little bit. Kind of give it a little bit of a roundness to it. So we're going to start here, go straight down, and then kind of come up like that. All right? That way it doesn't confuse us with the English letter V. We come straight down and then back up around, and that's the letter nu for nu, nu, nu. That's the letter nu, nu, nu. Okay? All right, let's have our next letter. The next letter is, remember, xi. Xi. Start from the throat when you make that sound. Xi. Xi. Okay? Now, I'm going to draw it just a little bit differently than what's reflected on the screen. Not much of a variation, but let's go to the board now and let's look at here. We're going to start just about right here. Have a little bit of a tail on the top side. We're going to start there. We're going to come back around, looks a little bit like a big epsilon, and then finish off like that, okay? All right, one more time. Back around. See how I made that? All right, let's look at it on the video one more time. It's the letter xi, xi. It has that X sound as in wax. Wax. X, 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 xi, xi. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. All right, one that's going to be easy to make. It's the letter omicron, the letter omicron. Let's go to the board here and notice that it's just like the English O, just a circle. All it is, omicron, as in omelet, omelet, omelet. All right, let's go back to the video, look at it. Looks just like omelet, All right, let's take a look at the next letter. It's the letter, that's right, P. All right, it makes the P sound. Now notice on the screen that there are 3 strokes involved. And the way that this particular letter is made is with 2 short lines, and then the 3rd stroke comes over the top. You're going to build your walls of this little P, and then you're going to put a house, put a roof on the top of it, okay, if you want to think of it that way. So let's go to the board and let's see how it's done. Something like this. We're going to start here with our first stroke. All right, then we'll come down with our second stroke, our second wall, and then we're going to put a little roof on top. All right, let's do it again. We're going to come down with our first stroke, first wall of our house, second wall, and then we're going to come over the top with a little roof, and that's the letter P. It makes the P sound, P. Okay, there it is on the screen, P. All right, let's go to the next letter now. The next letter is, think carefully, think real carefully before you say it. All right, it's the letter rho. It's the letter rho. It makes the r sound. And notice on this one that we're going to start, just make a circle and come back down on the left-hand side. Look at those arrows. All right, let's go to the board now. Notice how we go back around like this. Looks a little bit, I hesitate to say it, but it looks a little bit like the English P, but it's not. It's the Greek rho, and it makes the R sound. Start here, and we come around like that. Start here, come around like that. Now some people do it like this. If you feel more comfortable with making it like that, you can do that as well. If you want to come back around, that's fine. But that's the rho, the letter rho, the R sound. Now let's go back to the video. And there it is on the screen, the letter rho. All right, let's look at the next letter. Sigma, sigma. All right, notice it's just sort of like a circle with a little tail on it. Okay, so let's look at it here on the board. All right, come around like this. Got a little tail on it. Just like that. Start here, come back around. Sigma, sigma. Now remember, this is the sigma that's used in the middle of a word or that begins a word. If a word begins with a sigma or it has it anywhere in the word itself, we use this sigma there. But now I want you to take a look at another sigma that we make, and it's called the terminal sigma. The terminal sigma. And notice what happens is that it looks like a huge C, like the English letter C, and sort of comes back around with a tail underneath the line. So let's draw it on the board here. Here's the terminal sigma. Come back around, just like that. Start here, come back around, something like that. Both of those have the S sound. S, 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 sigma. All right? Take a look at it one more time. Now let's go to the next letter. That's the letter tau. The letter tau. Okay? Notice a stroke down with a small tail, and then over the top of that, crossing our T, crossing our tau. Let's go to the board now and notice how we do it. T, t, tau. 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 Make several of those now. Make several. I noticed that I went a little different way on that one, but that's okay. Tau. Tau. There it is on the screen. Tau. T, t, t. All right, let's look at the next letter. The next letter is upsilon. Upsilon. Makes the sound, as in put, or sometimes the long sound, as in loot, All right, notice how it's made there by looking at the screen, just sort of one stroke. And let's go on the board and let's look at it here. We come down right there, make sure it sits on the bottom. Make sure it sits on its bottom. Sometimes people will give it a little tail on either end. Sometimes it'll come like this, something like that. But give it a good rounded bottom. Good rounded bottom there for upsilon. Upsilon. Look at it again. There it is. See, it doesn't come to a point on the bottom, but it has a good bottom. Make sure you do that. Not a point as in a wedge shape. Make sure you round that bottom up. Upsilon. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. Next letter is phi. 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 And notice how I'm going to make it on the board there, all one stroke. All right, so you start on the upper left-hand side and you go back around like you're making a big circle, and then you come right back down through the middle of it, give it a little tail just past the line. So let's look at it here now as we go to the board. All right, we're going to start here, go back around, and then straight down. Start here, go back around, straight down. Phi, 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 phi. Now notice, and I'm going to draw here on the board for you, how sometimes you'll see it. It'll look something like this. Sometimes people just have a line through it similar to that. And I believe that your book has something to say along that lines as well. But fee, let's draw it one more time now. Let's practice. Here we go. Do that several times. Fee, fee, fa, fa, fa. All right, let's look at it one more time on the screen. Fee. All right, let's go to the next letter. Our next letter is key. Key. Remember, it has the k sound, as in chemist. K, k. And there you can see that there are two strokes used to make this particular letter. First one is over on the left-hand side, comes back down, and we want that key to intersect really right on the line. So let's notice on the board how I'll make it here. I'm going to start here. All right, we're going to come back around just below the line a little bit. Then we're going to go up here for our second one, second stroke. Come back, and we want it to intersect right on the line. Okay? Key. K, 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 k. Back down. And then I come back right there. See where I intersect? I intersect right on that line. K, 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 key. K, k, k. All right, let's go look at it on the video now. Two strokes. That's the key. All right, let's take a look at the next letter. Next letter is psi. 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 Now notice it's going to take two strokes. First, we have a letter that looks a little bit like the upsilon, and then we're going to have a line right down through the middle of it. And on some text, that line will extend up even a little bit higher. So let's take a look at it here as I draw it on the board. All right, you can start here, come around like that, and then just come back right down through it. Some people say it looks a little bit like a pitchfork, if that helps you a little bit. But sometimes, again, you'll see, as I mentioned just a moment ago, that that line will extend all the way up into there. It'll go up a little higher even. But that's the letter psi. Psi. It makes the ps, ps, ps sound, as in taps. Ps, ps. Okay, well, we've come to the end now with this last letter, and it's the letter omega, the last letter of the Greek alphabet, the letter omega, omega. And again, I almost hesitate to tell you that it looks like a W. It's really not. It's an omega, but here's how we make it. Notice on the board now, start here, just come up around like that. Omega. All right, let's look at the video one more time. Look at the video and notice that the intersection comes up almost to the middle of the line, but not quite. So we'll work on it again. Let's go back to the board and notice that even you might want to round it a little bit more. And that's the letter omega, and it gives you, it makes the O sound, the O sound. O, O, O. Okay, well those are the letters of the Greek alphabet. That's how to make them, how to draw them, and what you need to do now is to spend some time working on those, practicing them over and over again, just write them out several times. Now, what we'll also do as we progress through the course, as we begin to write out some of the words, and you write them out on note cards, and we write out some Greek sentences, you'll get lots of practice in writing these letters as well. But remember to memorize the letters in their alphabetical order. Go down and be able to see them on sight and be able to recall what letter they are and the sound that they make. And again, it's important to, as you're writing those letters, make the sounds, practice them over and over again. Learn your letters so that you'll come to enjoy using the Greek New Testament. We've come to an end for this particular section of our class, and in the next section we're going to discuss some other critical things about the Greek letters and the vowels and diphthongs and other things that you'll need to know in order to pronounce the Greek words and to know how to read some of the sentences and some of the words of the Greek New Testament. I appreciate so much your diligence, and I want to encourage you to keep working hard. You need to work with this material every day, work with it several times a day if you can, and you'll really benefit from it in the long run. And so until our next section, in which we come back together to talk about things we just mentioned a moment ago, I bid you a very pleasant good day.